Education and Assistant Director of the University of Florida Literacy Institute. He is also an author and a researcher. Welcome, Dr. Burns. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're so glad to have you here.
Great, thank you. Thanks so much for letting me be here. This is really a treat for me to be able to work with people in that beautiful state, especially around MTSS and RTII, et cetera. So this is really exciting. So let's do this. I asked if we could have chat enabled. So in the chat, please put in just briefly what your job is. You know, just 1 or 2 words, what your title is, what your role is. If you could do that, please, and chat that to everyone so we can get a sense of what all of you do. We'll start there. Awesome. Wow, that's great. So I see some interventionists, some state consultants, great. So a lot of administrators and directors, interventionists, great. Special ed teachers, Title I teachers, consultants. Cool. Awesome. Thank you. I'm glad each of you are there. I'm going to leave, here. Thank you for being here. I'm going to leave chat open. If you have a question you want to throw in chat, please throw it in chat. I'll keep an eye on chat and try and respond. The shorter the question or comment, the more likely it is that I'll be able to respond. Because if you write a long chat, I can't take time to read it as I'm talking. So if you have a quick question you want to throw in, also feel free to unmute and talk as well. I know a lot of people don't like to do that on these Zoom sessions. So I'm really excited to be here and at a conference explicitly talking about, RTII, responsive intervention, and MTSS. The thing that's exciting is I do work in this area, I do a lot of research in this area, and today we're talking about tier 3. Now I'm going to talk about tier 3. We have to focus on that. Without a good tier 1 or tier 2, you can't have a good tier 3. I'll say that very bluntly. Without a good tier 1, you can't have a good tier 2. Without a good tier 1, you will not have an effective tier 2. I've seen many times where you have really good targeted tier 2 interventions delivered in a small group where you progress monitor and the kids do great. But then the percentage of kids who score in the proficient range at the benchmarking doesn't increase because we didn't address tier 1. So without a good tier 1, you can't have a good tier 2. The numbers of kids needing tier 2 will be too big. And without a good tier 2, you can't get a good tier 3. In order to do what I'm about to show you, you're talking about 5 to maybe 10% of the student population. That's it. If it's more than that who need tier 3 support, you've got a tier 1 or tier 2 problem that needs to be addressed first. Now, I don't know the history in Oregon, although I do. I have some sense of it. But I'm not going to pretend I know your history. But I know in states like Oregon, in schools I worked with in states like Oregon, where they have a proud problem-solving history, right? Where problem-solving teams been doing problem-solving teams for decades and doing good in-depth problem analysis. In a lot of states, which I work, if your first step in starting an RTI model is to focus on tier 3, your model is doomed to failure. So this is, by the way, I love this graphic, so I'm going to show it real quickly. This is a typical problem-solving team meeting in my experience. We start off with, we're not sure what's going on, and then we start, his older brother had the same problem. He has slow processing and working memory. We don't know what to do. Well, here's the scenario, that's too much time. I've already tried that. And what you wind up at the end, reduce the spelling list and move them to the front of the room. And the thing is, I say that jokingly, but we did do a study. We looked at recommendations in school psych reports, and the 2 most common ones were preferential seating and reduced workload. So move them to the front of the room and reduce the spelling list were still the 2 most common recommendations. Someone said you're not seeing my screen right now. No, it says it's sharing. I checked it. All right. So are you seeing my screen okay? Everyone else? Yeah, good. Thank you. All right. So, and there's been times when I've been at those problem-solving team meetings where we're focusing on tier 3, and everyone looks to you or something and says, "What do we do?" And you don't have an answer. So I want to show you a framework today to answer these questions that we really can have an effective tier 3. When I worked in Minneapolis, I used to work at the University of Minnesota. I was co-director of the Minnesota Center for Reading Research. And we got this wonderful grant from Target Corporation, gave us $8 million and to build and study an RTI system in around 2010. And so we built this product we called Press. Now I don't get any royalties, it still exists. I don't get royalties for it. The University of Minnesota sells it. It's a great tool. Now we first built it with these six schools in Minneapolis, focusing on K through 3. So if we assume 50 kids per grade across these 6 schools, that's 1,200 kids. I don't know the numbers off the top of my head, how many kids got a tier 2 intervention, but it was a lot. So if we assume, 20% of these is still going to be over 200 kids. So of all those kids, we only had 17 that needed a tier 3 intervention. 17 that we thought weren't doing well, 17 that we thought, we couldn't figure out what was going on or whatever. So these are those 17 kids. And this is their rate, their slope, their rate of improvement, their average increase in words per minute per week, although some are letter sounds. So, we had a couple kids making negative growth. We had a couple kids making pretty much 0 growth. I don't remember this kid. I don't remember why he's on the list because he was doing well. 3 words per minute per week is pretty darn good after 6 weeks. So I don't remember why he was on the list. I'm sorry. But all the rest of them you see were not doing well. But across 6 schools with 1,200 kids total in K3, we only had 17 kids. That's my point. With a really good tier 1 and a really good tier 2, the number of kids who need tier 3 should be fairly small. Now, we had $8 million. It's not going to be 17 kids across 6 schools. I know that. But we do see a smaller percentage. Now, I think I'm going to skip this for time's sake. We'll come back to that. So here is a little guy who's in kindergarten. And he came to us in kindergarten with very low skills in Minneapolis as part of this Press project. Now, we taught him his phonemic awareness pretty quickly. He did great, learned that. Life was great. But then we tried to teach him his letter sounds. And when I say letter sounds, I'm talking about all grapheme, phoneme correspondence, but I call it letter sounds. Try and teach him letter sounds, this grapheme, phoneme correspondences, and this little guy just never seemed to get it. So we got so desperate, we went back and looked back at initial learning theory to try and figure out how to help this kid. And we came up with a framework I'm going to show you today. Oops. Oh, shoot. There we go. So we came up with this framework. So this is the National Center on Intensive Intervention. They came up with this after we developed this framework, but I'm going to contextualize it within this. The National Center on Intensive Intervention says you start with a good tier 2 intervention, a standard protocol, well-developed, well-studied intervention, progress monitor. Kid does great, good, keep doing it. Kid doesn't do well, okay, then we have to collect additional diagnostic data and either adapt the intervention or change the intervention and continue the progress monitor. If it doesn't work, we collect additional diagnostic data. My research and what I think we need to focus more on is this. Schools do a really good job of screening. Every one of you have a screener, I bet. I won't take time to talk about them, but every one of you probably has a good reading screener. Probably every one of you have some progress monitoring tool in place. What we don't do a good job of, oftentimes in schools, is getting additional diagnostic data to see what the kids need. Remember, purposes of assessment. Diagnostic data, those are data we collect to identify students' strengths and difficulties. And this is what we really need when this tier 2 intervention isn't working well. So what does that diagnostic data look like? Well, it depends on who you ask. Some folks have suggested we collect additional processing data. We give the kid a cognitive measure and look at their processing speed and working memory and all that kind of stuff. Well, there was Pfeiffer in 2009 recommended that very approach. And he made very specific recommendations about what constructs we should measure and what measures we should use. So we did a meta-analysis. Now, this is a meta-analysis, so it's a standard deviation unit. So, 0.4 means that kids that got the intervention at 0.4 standard deviation is better than the kids that didn't, regardless of the measure. And we, generally speaking, 0.4, 0.5, that's a decent effect size. 0.8 is large. Anything below 0.2 is questionable, is small. The larger the effect, the larger the effect. So we computed this effect size for a couple of different things. I want to look at one thing. We took those recommendations that he made, and we found 8 studies that examined the effect of using cognitive functioning measures to develop reading interventions. And the average effect size was 0.17. Quite small, not effective at all. So then got us thinking, what about executive functioning? Okay, that's a skill that a cognitive process that we all tend to focus on. Is that worth looking at? Well, Jacob and Parkinson did their famous meta-analysis in 2015 with 67 studies. Almost all of them were published in the 5 years between 2010 and 2015. So all very recent studies, or most recent studies. Executive functioning academic skills were correlated at about 0.3 for both reading and math. So we tend to think of executive function as being more related to math than reading. That's not true. It's 0.3 for both. And by the way, only 0.3. Not a terribly strong correlation. Changing skills in executive function did not lead to increased skills in reading or math. There's no evidence for causal link between executive function and reading and math. Executive functioning interventions are not interventions for reading and math. They just don't work. I wish they did. And so when what about working memory? Well, that's working memory training. That's a good one, right? Well, Melby, Lervog, and Hume did their famous meta-analysis, 2012, looking at working memory training and their effect on reading. Now, they called reading verbal ability, which is comprehension, basically. Why they called it that, I don't know, but it was a 0.13. Working memory had very little effect on comprehension, very little effect on decoding, and pretty much no effect on math. And this has been replicated a number of times. There's no evidence that working memory training generalized to any other skill. Folks, working memory training doesn't generalize to working memory very well, but certainly is not generalized to reading and math. I don't know how to say this. Schwalkhofer, whatever. Same thing. Verbal comprehension, 0.16. Decoding, 0.08. Math, 0.09. Sala and Gobet, literacy skills, 0.11. Working memory training does not generalize to reading or math. We looked at all these meta-analyses on basic cognitive processes and the relationship and the effect of training them on reading and reading in this example. And we found 0.27, like 200 studies. It doesn't work. I wish it did, but it doesn't. So instead, when I talk diagnostic data, I'm not talking about measures of cognitive functioning. I'm talking about measures of phonemic awareness, reading fluency, etc. And for those, we saw much better effects. In the 0.4 to 0.5 range. What's the best way to assess a kid's reading skills for intervention? You assess their reading skills. It's almost that simple. So I don't think aptitude. When you think diagnostic data, don't think aptitude by treatment interaction. Think skill by treatment interaction. Really dive in to assess the skill in which you're intervening and use those data to drive intervention. That's how we operate within a tier 3. Now, I would argue that tier 3, the referral for tier 3, now for me, problem solving teams come in at tier 3. We do a problem, I'm calling it problem solving team. I'm assuming all of you know what that means. If you don't, please tell me in chat. But like your child study team, your teacher assistance team, various names, but I'm calling it problem solving team. Group of interdisciplinary professionals sit together, look at the kid's problem, generate solutions. That's tier 3. That's the group that designs the tier 3 intervention. In my opinion, and the work we do in schools, screening decisions are made by the grade level team or the PLCs. At the high school level, it's departmental teams, like the ELA team. Progress monitoring, is the kid making sufficient growth at tier 2 and tier 3? Those are decisions made by the grade level team. If the grade level team or the PLC, whatever it is, says this kid's not doing well, and we have enough data now to suggest that we know this intervention is not working at tier 2, they're the one that makes the referral to the problem solving team, and the intervention moves from tier 2 to tier 3. Does that make sense? That's when you go from tier 2 to tier 3. And I would argue, based on research by Ted Christ, you need a lot of data to make that decision. You can tell me after 6 weeks, after 3 weeks of weekly progress monitoring, that the intervention is not going well. and maybe we should make some modification to it. But I'm going to need probably 12 data points to give up on the intervention, according to research by Ted. Because then you can see after 10, 12 data points reliably that the kid is not making sufficient progress. And when that happens, that's when we make the referral to the problem-solving team, and we go back and collect this additional diagnostic data. That's all happens before the problem-solving team occurs. So we meet. So the problem-solving team meets. We have the grade level teams made its referral. We've got additional diagnostic data, and we're ready to solve the problem. Now, the diagnostic data I collect might look different than what some of you do. So I'm going to ask all of you, in fact, I'm going to stop sharing for a second so we can all see each other. I'll share again in just a second. Oops. There we go. So now all of us can see each other. I'm going to ask you to please turn your camera on for just a second. You don't have to say anything. You obviously don't have to if you don't feel comfortable, but if it's okay, just turn your camera on for literally 10 seconds. It'll be really fast. Give me a second. While you do that, I'll answer some of these. Oh, it's disabled? Oh, you can't turn your cameras on? I'm sorry, I sure told you I was going to do that. Okay, you can stop telling me. Can we enable that? Sorry. Okay, good. Sorry about that. That's my fault. Do you have a recommendation for how much time in between data collection? So I think it's at least has to be once a week for that very reason, because I'm going to collect data. I want to make decisions as soon as I can. You can collect data twice a week, but every other week, then you're talking about a lot of time. Yes, even at tier 2, we still collect it once a week because we got to decide to go from tier 2 to tier 3, or eventually tier 3 to special ed potentially. We're going to be collecting data once a week. And we do 1 minute. We do CBM 1 minute. So it's literally 1 minute per kid per week. All right, now everyone can see me. Now, everyone, I'm going to ask you to put your hands together so the camera can see you. But put your hands together as if you are holding a golf club, okay? Just make the golf grip. Okay, good, thank you. All right, good, you can stop. And you can turn your camera off now if you'd like. You just did one of 3 things. You either went, okay, or you went, oh, I remember that. Or you went, right? Or actually, there was a 4th thing this time. Some of you actually went, it was pretty great. I'll share my screen again. Pretty perfectly demonstrated how humans learn. When we learn, we go through very specific phases, okay? You start off in the acquisition phase. People who are slow and inaccurate. That's those you went, I have no idea what he's talking about. Now, some of you did go, I don't know what to do. Some of you, many of you did look around, did do this. Why? Because you were seeking a model. When you're first learning something and you're in the acquisition phase and you're slow and inaccurate, you need lots of modeling with explicit instruction, immediate feedback. Now, once you can do it, but you really, really got to think about it. You're accurate, but slow, right? So that's the kid who reads sound at a time, does math on their fingers. They can do it and they're getting it right, but it takes a long time. For those kids, practice, 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 practice. Practice is really important. I don't know why we ever got away from, why people have pushed back on that. Practice is really important. Why? Because practice is how we learn something to the point of generalization. Once we're able to do it with sufficient speed and accuracy, we're ready to generalize it. But I don't care how fast they do it until they do it accurately. So I get them accurate, then I get them fast, then they can generalize. And again, people push back on me. Well, does speed really matter? No, what matters is automaticity. How do we measure automaticity? Speed. That's why. Unless you remember something to automaticity, you can't generalize it. You can't use it. And then once you can learn it with speed and automaticity and can generalize it, then you can use the information to solve problems. Now, our top goal is here. We want all of our kids using all this information to solve problems. But if they're functioning down here, they can't do this. We have to match the intervention to where the kid is functioning. Again, we get it accurate first, then sufficient speed, and then we want them to apply it. So I'm going to take that learning process. I'm going to break it up into 3 questions, 3 areas. Are they learning it in the first place? Are they remembering it? And can they apply it? Those 3 steps. If it's beyond that, that's not my world, right? That's not a tier 3 problem. If it's tier 3 problem, if they're not learning it, or they're learning it, don't remember it, or if they're learning it, remember it, but can't apply it. And honestly, in reading, it's almost always these first 2. It's almost always the first 2. So here's a kid who was in 3rd grade getting repeated reading. So this is the progress monitoring data. He's getting repeated reading, and they monitor progress once a week. And this is the accuracy data. I'll talk about that in a second. So you can see the kid, if anything, he was flat. He might be going down, right? See the slope going down. So he's not doing well. I mean, they do this intervention for 9 weeks. And they called me up like, Matt, what do we do? So how do we know, how much accuracy? I knew I was going to do that because it's going to be a slow one. How do we know how much accuracy is enough? Don't say 80%. Where we ever got 80%, I don't know. There's not a skill I know of in the entire academic world that 80% represents mastery. Most of the time it's 90%. And I honestly think 90% is a measurement issue, because if I have 10 items and the kid gets one wrong, that's 90%, right? You can't get 95%. So 90% is a much better criterion. And for reading, for connected text reading, lots of studies, and some of which we just submitted for publication, we see consistently 93 to 97%. So if a kid can read 93% of the words correctly, they're probably ready to start practicing. Everything else in the world, sight words, math facts, spelling words. And when I say sight words, I mean, let me be clear. I'm sorry, I shouldn't use that term. Sight word means a word that they look at and just know by sight. They've memorized it. They've orthographically mapped it, if you want to use that. I'm not talking about. I'm saying they've seen the word enough times that they've memorized it. And there are many words in the English language that we need to have memorized in order to read successfully. So that's going to be 93 to 97%. Yeah, the 95% was based on the initial recommendation back in 1949, but we've played with it a little bit to this 93 to 97% to account for measurement error. So 93% is a better criterion than 95% for many kids. In fact, some kids in research study we just did, 90%, younger kids, 90% might even work better. So we're still doing research on that. I'm not going to talk about that. So but for now, 93% is reading words, 93% correct. You go from acquisition to proficiency. Everything else, letter sounds, math facts, spelling words, you name it, 90% is a pretty good criterion. So this poor little guy, I need to rescale this. You can't see it because of the scale. They had 1 point that was high, maybe 2, but the rest are below 93%. And they're doing repeated reading. And so we said, you know what, stop the intervention. This is not helping this kid. So we switched interventions to one I'll show you in a second that focused on modeling. And after a couple, we saw some up and downs. After a couple of weeks, we finally got him consistently over 93%. Now, look at his rate of growth. We saw a little bit of growth, then it leveled off and came back down. Then we switched back to repeated reading, and look at his rate of growth. He took off. So here he was getting repeated reading, but it was not accurate. We got him accurate, switched back to repeated reading, and look at his rate of growth compared to there. Same intervention. Now he's ready for it. Different kids, same scenario. This poor little guy, man, they're doing repeated reading with him, and he came in during the school year, and after 5 weeks, it wasn't working. But he's reading like 80% of the words correctly. Like, you guys, you're torturing this poor little kid. Stop. So we switched interventions, got him accurate, switched back to repeated reading. His rate of growth there compared to there. Third kid, same scenario, not doing well. Switch interventions, focus on accuracy. Gosh dang it, get him accurate. Switch back to repeated reading. Look at his rate of growth there compared to there. Same intervention, just wasn't ready for it. These are the data shown experimentally. We published this in Reading and Writing Quarterly. Repeated reading is in what kind of text? That's a really good question, Allison. I didn't talk about it. I glossed over it. They were using probably text that was too high for these kids. They were using grade level or just below, and it was probably too high for these kids. So one option could have been to switch different types of text. I'll talk about that shortly. But regardless, the intervention wasn't working because the kids weren't able to read with accuracy. Your question was insightful. I'll come back to that in a few minutes. So then, yeah, okay, so I'm gonna come back to these three areas. And for time's sake, I'm gonna skip this, make one quick point. So Lynn Fuchs et al. 2017 published their taxonomy of intensification. And they talked about dosage. They talked about several things, but dosage, increasing sessions, increasing minutes. And unfortunately, in many schools in which I work, it's dosage. It's not going well. They increase dosage. And I'm telling you right now, that's not going to work for a lot of kids. Simply increasing the time, the number of minutes, decreasing the size of the group, all of those things, for many of the kids with whom I work, is not going to help. Some of the kids need these other two. Some of the kids need alignment for acquisition, which basically means addresses their needs. You're not actually addressing their needs. You have to make sure that the intervention you're doing addresses their needs. Comprehensiveness for acquisition means more modeling. Add in more modeling. And then generalization, you build things to help them generalize. So I'm going to take that framework and I'm going to apply it to this by looking at diagnostic data and deciding, do we have to adapt the intervention or change the intervention? Okay. Someone asked what program for repeated reading. There wasn't a program. They were just doing basic repeated reading. They didn't have a program. They just had grade level text and stuff. So what I'm going to do for my diagnostic data is I'm going to ask these three questions. I'm going to go to the person actually doing the intervention. Now, oftentimes that's a teacher, but if it's an interventionist or something like that, whoever is the one doing the intervention, we ask these questions. At the end of the lesson, can the kid do it? Yes or no? And by the way, the answer is yes. Everything else is a no. Sometimes that's a no. It depends, that's a no. Inconsistently, that's a no. Yes, the kid can do it. Everything else is a no. And you'd be surprised. I mean, the kid I was talking about earlier, my little friend, I'll call him Lonnie, that wasn't his name, the little kindergartner. But we would literally teach him T, right? We teach him T, he says T. And we'd sit down and teach him T, he says T. And then at the end of the lesson, he'd do it, he's doing fine. Then at the end of the lesson, I hold up a T and he'd say, I just taught it to him 10 seconds ago. At the end of the lesson, kid can't do it. If that's the case, they're not learning it in the first place. Okay. At the end of the lesson, the kid can do it. Great. The next day, do they remember it? That's the second question. Again, yes, everything else is a no. Sometimes depends. Those are no's. Learns it in the first place. At the end of the lesson, can the kid do it? No. Okay, not learning it in the first place. At the end of the lesson, can the kid do it? Yes. Okay, learning it in the first place. Now, the next day, does the kid remember it? No. Okay, that's where the breakdown's occurring. At the end of the lesson, the kid can do it. Great, learning it in the first place. The next day, do they remember it? Yes. Good, they're maintaining it. Now, can they apply it? Again, yes, everything else is a no. So I'm going to try and figure out at which step that breakdown's occurring, and I'm going to change the intervention, intensify the intervention based on that piece of information. I'm not going to show you the studies. We've published one study on this, two studies on this, and we have two more under review right now. But by the way, other people have studied this idea. Can you ask interventionists this type of questioning? And they get it right pretty often. I never studied this, but I used to do a brief experimental analysis to get to the same information. I'd spend an hour or even two working with these kids. And then I showed the teacher, and the teacher went, oh, I could have told you that. I went, oh, that's a good point. Someone started asking the people working with them, and it was clear to them which one it was. Okay. So if they're not learning in the first place, or they're learning it but not remembering it, or they're learning it, remembering it, but they can't generalize it, we're either going to pick a different intervention or adapt our intervention to match the kid's needs. Okay, so let's walk through each of these and how we do that. Starting with this one. So the first thing, if we're doing the intervention and it's not working, and they're not learning it in the first place, at the end of the intervention session, they can't do it. Those kids that during the repeated reading program were not learning it in the first place. So there's a good chance, and I'll tell you right now, only based on my experience, If the kid's not learning it in the first place, you're doing the wrong intervention almost every single time. When I was a school psychologist, my first ever day as a real life school psychologist. I'm in South Bend, Indiana, working at Marquette Elementary School. And the principal was taking me around, introducing me to all the second grade, taking all the teachers in this building. She kept introducing me as, this is Matt Burns. He's our new school psychometrist. Now, I saw some of your school psychologists. Those of us who are school psychologists, we don't like to be called psychometrists. But it was my first ever day. I didn't know what to do, so I just kind of ignored it. She introduced me to the second grade teacher and said, this is Matt Burns. He's our new school psychometrist. I finally said, Mrs. Livingston, I'm so sorry. I'm not a school psychometrist. I'm a school psychologist. Now, the second grade teacher standing there said, you're a school psychologist? I said, yeah. She goes, we've never had a school psychologist before. I bet they did, but they called the psychometrist. Anyway, yes, great. She said, okay, I have a kid who's selective mute. It's the first day of second grade. All of first grade, never said a single word. Can you help him? I mean, it's my first ever day. What am I going to do? Say no? I'm like, sure. Send it to my office. Now think about that for a second. He's selective mute. What am I going to do with him in my office? So he comes in, he sits down, and I run back first. And keep in mind, my office is, the janitor's closet that they let me put a table in so I can do some testing. So I run down, and I happen to have best practices in school psychology sitting there. Oh, it's sitting over there. I can't reach it. And that was back when it was one book. Remember, this is back in the 1900s. We didn't have Google back then. So I go and I sit down and I'm flipping through this book. Selective mutism wasn't mentioned. In my 2 years of specialist level training, we never once talked about it. Now, you can discuss the ethics of me working with this kid later. But so this kid walks in, sits down, and I literally have no idea what to do. So I say to him, hi, and guess what he says? How was your summer? How does second grade seem? I'm asking him questions as if no one thought of that. So after just a few minutes, I'm sweating bullets. I'm like, I finally, it's early 1990s, he has a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle folder. So, oh, turtles, I love the turtles. Raphael, Donatello, Michelangelo, Leonardo. I like Raphael the best because he's smart and works with machines. And the little boy looked at me and said, I like Michelangelo the best because he's really funny. Great, talk about the turtles for a few minutes, send him back to class. Just like that, he's cured. In this school, on my very first day as a real life school psychologist, I'm Ann freaking Sullivan. But let's be clear, I had no idea what I was doing. I got lucky. That's happened to every single person on this call. Every single one of you has said, yeah, let's just try this. And it works. We don't know why. We don't care. It worked. This has happened too. Kid comes in and you say, I had a kid like that 2 years ago. And we did this research-based intervention and worked really well. Let's do that. And it doesn't work. Why? I think two reasons. Number one, we didn't do it the right way. We do that all the time in education. You'll hear some cool intervention at some conference or something. You go back to your classroom or go back to your school and think, oh, I forget. Now, what do? And you don't do it the right way. Number two, it didn't actually address the kids' needs. If the kids are not learning it in the first place, there's a good chance you're not actually addressing the kids' needs. And the first thing I'm going to recommend you do is assess the prerequisite skill, because you might need to back it up. Again, I will suggest most of the kids with whom I work and they're not learning it in the first place, we have to back it up. Now, I would love to spend a lot of time on this particular point because I think we need to really drive it home. But I'm going to make a couple quick points real quickly. I wish I could spend more time on it. This is really sort of a tier two. So let's say your school starts with MAP, NWA MAP, right? Or STAR, something like that, as your screener. Now that's very comprehension loaded. So if they score well on that, well, then they're fine. They're core, they get core instruction. If they score low on MAP, that's indication they're going to struggle with comprehension. Then we're going to assess fluency. Now, some schools start with fluency. Dibbles, oral reading fluency, Acadians, oral reading fluency, something like that. If they score low on that, if they have low comprehension, but good fluency, then we know comprehension is their intervention target. Find the most fundamental skill in which the kid struggles. If we assess their fluency and that's low, then we look at their phonics. Nonsense word fluency, something like that. Can they decode? Great. Fluency is the most fundamental skill in which they struggle. intervene for that. If phonics are low, look at their phonemic awareness. If they have good phonemic awareness, but phonics are low, intervene for phonics. And then lastly, if phonemic awareness is low, we address phonemic awareness. Now, here's lots of measures I'm going to talk about. So comprehension, NWA map, star reading, A reading, those are pretty comprehension loaded, if not completely comprehension loaded. Star early literacy, not so much, but these other ones, certainly that's the case. Fluency, Dibble's oral reading fluency, Acadian's oral reading fluency, easy CBM, oral reading fluency, all of those are good indicators of reading, but also direct measures of reading fluency. Decoding, nonsense word fluency, don't get hung up on nonsense word fluency. I sit here within UFly. I'm assistant director at UFly. I was the Minnesota Center for Reading Research co-director. Like, I'm a reading person. And nonsense word fluency used to drive me insane because it's not reading. But then it hit me one day, well, nonsense word fluency is not designed to measure reading. It's designed to measure, can a kid sound out the words? And it does that really, really well. It'll tell you if a kid can sound out words. Think of it as just doing that, and then it does that well. Any measure of word attack, pseudo words, those are direct measures of reading decoding. Spelling can be heavily, I know spelling, encoding, etc. But if they struggle with spelling, there's a good chance they're going to have low decoding skills as well. Now, phonemic awareness, there's a lot of them. Phoneme segmentation fluency, initial sound fluency, first sound fluency, the basic CBMs. The phonemic awareness inventory, which I've given you as a handout. For time's sake, I can't get into the past. I don't use the past, and I don't recommend it. First of all, it's never been studied. There's no information on its reliability or validity, and it doesn't really measure isolating, blending, and segmenting. It measures all kinds of other things that aren't really related to reading. So I've given you a phonemic awareness inventory we measured as part of the handout for today. We created that we've studied and published in Reading and Writing Quarterly, a couple other journals, I forget which ones, and we just study its validity, its reliability, and it measures isolating, blending, and segmenting sounds. So measure these areas, basically. Get these big buckets. Low comprehension, good fluency, focus on comprehension. Low comprehension, low fluency, good decoding, focus on fluency. Low comprehension, low fluency, low decoding, good phonemic awareness, focus on decoding. And then low across the board, focus on phonemic awareness. Now, I teach phonemic awareness and decoding together, but I'm simply saying if they don't have phonemic awareness, you better be sure to emphasize that as part of your intervention package. Does that make sense? Conceptually. Okay, let me show you how to cheat. So in this one, any kid, so I've got all the data I need right here to get a good start. I'll talk about rapid automatized naming. Thank you, Danielle. We'll talk about that. That's a requirement for dyslexia screening. I'll talk about that in a second. So this is their NWA map score. And I don't know what the RIT, I mean, I know what a RIT is, but someone say to me, my kid's RIT's 169. I have no idea what that means. So I convert it to percentile rank. So anything below the 25th percentile suggests having difficulty with that. Oral reading fluency. This is Dibble's oral reading fluency, which remember they used to call it DORF? That used to drive me nuts. DORF has to be the worst name in the history of testing. DORF. I couldn't say it with a straight face. So thank goodness they've gotten away with it. So oral reading fluency. Now let's say the criterion is 80. I'm making that up, but let's say it is. So any kid scoring below 80, that's too high. 70. Any kid below 70 is low in fluency. Now, remember I said earlier, 93%? If a kid can't read 93% of the words correctly, there's a good chance they're struggling to break the code. So if I've got, pick a kid, right? First percentile for comprehension, for math, that's comprehension. 30 words a minute, that's quite low for reading fluency, 77% correct. That's suggesting the kid's low in comprehension, low in fluency, and low accuracy, so low phonics, low decoding. Low comprehension, low fluency, low decoding, the kid needs decoding. Now compare that to a kid, let's pick one. Oh, maybe this kid right here. 8th percentile for comprehension, that's low. 50 words a minute, so fluency is low, but 96% correct. That's pretty good. So this could be a kid who's low in comprehension, low fluency, but good decoding skills. So for that kid, their intervention target would be fluency. Okay, does that make sense? I'm going to give you one. Oh, let me ask. I'll come back to the RAND question in a second. So I'll pick a kid. Let's do this. So look at a kid here. Look at student number, let's go with this one. Student number 9. 9th percentile for comprehension for RIT, for MAP, 57 words a minute, 88% correct. Put in chat. Now, if you notice when you click to chat, you can just pick me, right? So just select me, just chat it to me. Put in there either comprehension, fluency, or decoding. So which student number 9, 9th percentile for RIT, for comprehension, 57 words a minute, 88% correct. Which of those 3 do you think the kid needs? Be sure to chat it just to me. Good. Excellent point, Heidi. Okay, I see enough people coming in. By the way, I'm using the term decoding and phonics interchangeably. I really shouldn't. Decoding is what the kid does. Phonics is what we teach. Good job. Everyone's really nailing it. Okay, so this kid who is 9th percentile for comprehension. I'm sorry. Yeah, well, that's funny. I didn't notice that. 9th percentile for comprehension, 57 words a minute, 88% accurate means this is his most fundamental skill. So that kid would need decoding or phonics. Got somebody the questions to respond to. Oh, forgotten her name. Somebody had a really good point. Heidi. Heidi, start with decoding. Correct. Start with. You'll absolutely, during the intervention session, have kid read connected text, right? Absolutely, you'll be working on fluency as well. You might even ask comprehension questions or something as part of it. Absolutely. You might even do a 1-minute phonemic awareness warm-up. But for gosh sakes, this kid is going to get phonics, and they're going to get phonics a lot. And we might move beyond phonics very soon, who knows? But we're going to start with phonics. We can hit it a lot. So if I have a 30-minute, I'm making this up now. If I have a 30-minute intervention time period, I might do a 1-minute phonemic awareness warm-up. I might do 5 minutes of connected text reading, a couple minutes of reading text at the end. So we're going to get 20 minutes of phonics. And the reason I bring that up is I've seen too many times where kids needed phonics and they got a fluency intervention for 20 minutes or a phonemic awareness intervention for 20 minutes. And I'm not making that up. Neither one of those is going to help this kid. This kid needs phonics, probably. Now compare that to some other kid, this kid here, that's okay. We'll go with it. This is a better example. I'll have to use this one. It's not great, but I'll have to be okay. No, I can't. I'm looking for a kid with high accuracy and low fluency, and there's not a ton of them. There's this kid here and this kid here, but this kid's comprehension isn't terrible. His fluency isn't terrible. His accuracy is good. So I'd probably do fluency building for this kid, but I'm not convinced this kid really needs a tier 2 intervention, although that's pretty low. So I'd probably do some fluency building for that kid. And we literally sit down with our teams. We give them a sheet like this. They put in the data. They write in what the kid needs. We group them to deliver the small group intervention. And then picking the small group intervention, I think, is easy. So this is a matrix I use quite a bit. We teach our teachers to sit down, pull up the matrix, look at the data, look at these data, group the kids, low fluency. These kids all scored low on MAP, so they didn't bother putting that score in. Low fluency, low accuracy, low fluency, low accuracy, low fluency, low accuracy. These kids all got decoding. Low fluency, good accuracy. These kids all got fluency. And we just look at by grade, by area. So kindergarten, phonemic awareness, road to decode. Phonics, sound partners, phonics for reading, or rewards. These are both written by Anita Archer. They're great programs. Rewards is for both. This is 3rd grade and above. This is 4th grade and above, rewards. But rewards is for multisyllabic words. So it's a little more advanced than phonics for reading. So many of the kids with whom I work, we're looking at phonics for reading. 6-minute solution to read naturally. For fluency, comprehension, I use learning strategies, curriculum inferencing strategy, or main idea strategy. There are other things you can do as well. And literally, we got teachers to sit down, grade, area, boom, they get this. 2nd grade, phonics, sound partners. 3rd grade, fluency, read naturally. That's it. Group the kids, deliver a small group intervention. Now, what I'm getting at is that the kid's not learning it in the first place. There's a good chance that you're doing the wrong skill. You're doing fluency, the kid needs phonics. You're doing phonics, the kid needs more phonemic awareness. You're doing comprehension, the kid needs fluency. By the way, I see this all the time. I see the kids sitting around getting a small group intervention that focuses on comprehension and they can't sound out words. Not going to help. So if the kid's not learning it in the first place, and you sit down with the interventionist, can kid learn it in the first place? And they say, nope. Oh, okay, then I'm gonna assess the prerequisite skill. So if the kid's getting read naturally, I'm going to pull that kid and do a non-sensory fluency measure for 1 minute. Or the kid's getting comprehension, I'm going to pull that kid and do an oral reading fluency measure for 1 minute, or even a phonics measure as well, to try and figure out maybe we've missed it. Maybe we should back up. And I'm telling you from experience, I've not studied it, from experience, that's a lot of kids. That's a lot of kids with whom we work, that the intervention, the progress monitoring data, so the kid is not doing well, the intervention is not working, doing the wrong thing. Got to back it up. So that's the first thing I look at. Yes, phonics for reading is great. I agree, Barbara. Assess the point of breakdown. That, remember, is are they learning it in the first place? So at the end of the intervention session, can the kid do it? Yes, great. At the end, if the answer is no, then they're not learning it in the first place. At the end of the intervention session, can the kid do it? Yes. The next day, do they remember it? If the answer to that question is no, then they're not remembering it. If they're learning it in the first place and they're remembering it, then we ask, can they apply it? And then they're struggling to remember, to generalize it. So if a kid is at the end of the intervention session, can the kid do it? The answer is no. Assess the previous skill, the lower level skill. There's a good chance you're doing the wrong thing and you got to back it up. I see that all the time because they're getting comprehension and they need basic phonemic awareness and phonics. By the way, someone mentioned RAN. What about RAN? And I forgot the question. If you want to put it back in. Oh, what about rapid automatized naming? Where can these fit? So RAN is a screener for dyslexia. It tells us nothing for very little. I won't say nothing, but very little for intervention. I can't get a lot of detail on this. There was a meta-analysis done in 2015 that if you message me, email me or something, I'll send you the article. But they looked at what types of RAN predict reading, and pictures, sounds, pictures, shapes, colors, none of those correlated with reading very well at all. The only one that correlated well with reading, there were two, was letter naming fluency and numbers. So the best indicator of RAN, if your focus is reading, is letter naming fluency. Unless the kid doesn't know all the letter names, then it's not a measure of RAN. So the only time I use a RAN measure other than letter naming fluency is when the kid doesn't know all the letter names. So then I might use shapes or colors. But that doesn't really tell me anything as an interventionist. It doesn't really, doesn't tell me if the kid can decode or has phonemic awareness. So instead, I'm going to do these types of measures instead. Sometimes you have to back it up just within the skill. So let's say like phonemic awareness is a great example. There is no way to back up phonemic awareness. That's about as low as you go. So phonemic awareness, phonological awareness is a continuum that goes from knowing the number of that words or sentences are made of words, and cowboy makes cowboy, and fire truck is fire and truck, right? To down to syllable blending and segmenting, to rhyming, then isolating phonemes and blending and segmenting phonemes. Most kids come to school with these basic skills right here. So it might be that we're teaching blending and segmenting, and the kid can't isolate phonemes. So if the kid's not learning it in the first place, get out your phoneme awareness inventory, which I just sent you, or you have, and see, are you doing blending, segmenting, or something else, and the kid can't even isolate phonemes. Sometimes you have to back it up within the skill. For example, the kid's not learning it in the first place, do repeated reading. The kids I showed earlier, since one of you very smartly asked, well, what text were they using? If the kid's not learning it in the first place through repeated reading, and you assess this prerequisite skill, and that's low, I mean, that's good. I'm sorry, that's good. So phonics skills are good. So fluency is the right target. You may have to use an easier passage. You maybe have to use easier stuff for repeated reading, okay? Okay, let's see. IEP goals often speak to comprehension. I can't emphasize enough how much we can't do that. We did a study where we published it in a specialized journal, I forget which one. We looked at the PLAF statements, what we used to call PLEP, and the PLAFs, we had data on low decoding, low fluency, low this, low that, and then the comprehension, the goals were comprehension. That's a mismatch. That if the PLAF statement says they have low decoding, then the IEP goal should address decoding. Middle schoolers who have phonological processing weaknesses, that's pretty rare. Do I recommend phonemic awareness tasks if a kid lacks phonemic awareness? Yes, but isolating, blending, and segmenting. None of those advanced ones. Reversal, elision, like those are not related to reading. In fact, they're not even needed to read. So if I've got a middle schooler who still can't isolate, blend, or segment sounds, I'm going to focus on that, but that's pretty rare. In my middle school, that's a kid with a disability. And 20% of our kindergartners come to school proficient with phonemes. Correct. Many of them might be proficient with the phonological aspect of it, but not the phoneme aspect of it. And we did a study. I've never published this, so you don't have to believe me. We found that you really couldn't accurately screen kindergartners' reading skills until November. And any screening effort before November was almost a waste of time. Let's see. I have to, so I'm only focusing on, there's a question here, it's a fairly lengthy one. We're using effective tier 1 core materials. Once we know the specific skill breakdown, can we just intensify? Yes, you can. In fact, most of my tier 3 interventions are simply the same tier 2 modified. Okay. All right, so step 1, not learning it in the first place. We usually have to back it up. If we assess the prerequisite skill and they got it, then we have to provide more modeling. Okay, we have to provide more modeling. And there are lots of ways to do that. It's pretty strict. And by the way, I just observed, I was in, oh gosh, across 2 states, like, I don't know, 20 classrooms, K2. And I watched, I don't know, I don't even know how many initial lessons I saw. I saw one time where the teacher modeled it. The teacher went, we'll do this. They'd show to a group of kindergartners, show the T, right? Put T up. Say, all right, who knows what this is? Kids all stare, no one answers because they've never seen it before. And she said, so, okay, it's a letter. Oh, yeah, it's a letter. Oh, we knew that. Who knows what letter it is? They don't know. It's the letter T. Oh, okay, T. Everyone say that, T, great. Who knows what sound the T makes? I don't know. I sat there for like 30 seconds uncomfortably. Okay, T says T. Okay, who would think of a word that starts with T? She spent like 5 minutes to introduce the T sound. You know what I would have done? I would have said, everyone look, this is the letter T. Say that, T, good. T is a letter. T says T. What sound? T. Kid says T, good. Awesome, T. The word that starts with T would be top. Turn to your partner and say another word that starts with a T sound. I took 10 seconds to do what this person took, a minute to do. And the way I did it is more effective. We have to provide more modeling. So I don't know, I think basically, I think for time's sake, I won't show this video. It's on my YouTube channel. I've got a really cool YouTube channel. If you just search Matthew Burns on YouTube, I'm the first Matthew Burns that comes up, which I'm very proud of. But there's a lot of videos on there, and this one's on there. And basically, this is just showing you the letter T and teaching your T says, that type of thing. So if the kid's not learning in the first place, you have to provide more modeling. Now, I do want to show this video. Oh, shoot, I'm going to have to fast forward. Hold on. I'll tell you why I'm fast forwarding in just a second. Okay, so this is a little 2nd grade girl. Her reading fluency was low. We're doing reading fluency and it wasn't working. We assessed her prerequisite skills and she had good phonics. So this is a kid who can sound out the words, but for whatever reason, when they go to read the words in text, gets it wrong. Why? I have no idea. In fact, I don't care. This is an intervention we call duet reading. And what you do is you have the kid read a passage, and that's the part I just fast forwarded. You don't need to watch this little girl read for a minute while they follow along. Whoops. And every time a kid makes a mistake, you do immediate correction. And there should be lots of mistakes, right? This is what the intervention is supposed to address. And so I do immediate error correction. Say, whoops, that word is tree. What word? Tree. Good, tree. Go back and read that word again. Then at the end, you do the duet reading, which looks like this.
Okay. Now we are going to read together. I am going to read the first word. So, and then you will read the next word, was. And then we'll go back and forth reading every other word until the end of the passage. Do you have any questions? Okay. Let's begin. I
was
walking
down
the
road,
and
found
a
map,
it
was
neat.
I
Picked
it
up
to
see
where
it
would
take.
You like our fancy camera work, by the way?
Stop there. Typically, you would finish the entire passage, and then after that, let's try it again. This time, you read the first word, and I will read the second word.
I
Was
walking
down
the
road,
and
found
a
map.
it
Was
neat,
I
picked
it
up
to
see
where
it
would
take
me. Okay, then we'll stop right there. And now after this, I would ask Karma to read the entire passage again. But in the interest of time, we will just stop here.
Okay, so the kid reads first, you do all error correction. Then you read every other word, kid goes first, you go second, kid goes third, then you switch, you go first, kid goes second. Then at the end, the kid reads again. So the kid has read or had modeled for them every word on that page 4 times. That is a modeling intervention. It is designed to help them read more accurately. It is not designed to help them read more quickly, it's designed to help them read more accurately. So this is a kid who can sound out their words, but for whatever reason, when they go to read it on the page, you get it wrong. I don't know why that happens, it just does. And so those kids, we do an intervention called duet reading. You can see how this is a lot more modeling. This is a kid who's not learning in the first place. We're going to model accurate reading for the kid. And there's lots of others. For time's sake, I'm not going to show you these. These are just kind of scripts you would see. Yeah, the first read, the kid reads independently, but you do error correction. Would I give phonics instruction? This is a kid that has good phonics. So they shouldn't need that. If they do, then you back it up and do phonics. So here's one called listening passage preview. Again, I've given some scripts in here. This is set up to be like a script, so I don't have to walk it through. I just tell you what it is. Listening passage preview, a modeling intervention. Errorless phrase drill, another modeling intervention as well. So either if a kid's not learning in the first place and they have the prerequisite skill, modeling, just add in more modeling. Okay? So and that's a lot of kids with whom we work. At the end of the lesson, can the kid do it? Nope. Well, assess the prerequisite skill. Most of the time we have to back it up. But if not, then we have to provide more modeling within the intervention. Right? So that's the kid who wasn't learning it in the first place. Let's talk a little about the kids who learn it in the first place, but the next day they forget it. 2 options again. Remember, every time it's either pick a different intervention or modify the intervention. So not learning in the first place, we either back it up, pick an easier intervention or a lower target intervention, or add more modeling to the intervention. Here, we're going to pick a different intervention or add more repetition within the intervention. If the kids learning in the first place, not remembering it, dosage, 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 practice, practice, practice. Dosage is not the answer for every kid. I can't say that enough. Taking something that's not working, doing it more, doesn't work for a lot of kids. They need more modeling or to back it up. But if the kid is learning it in the first place but doesn't remember it, that's where we really got to hit dosage and practice. So the intervention I use, if the kid's learning it in the first place but not remembering it, is incremental rehearsal. It was developed by Jim Tucker in '89. It's a flashcard technique. I'm going to show it to you real quickly, and then we'll talk about it.
I'm going to demonstrate incremental rehearsal, which is an intensive intervention used to teach words for struggling learners who failed to learn with other approaches. With this student, I'm going to teach 2 words, knock and slowly. And the words that I'm going to be using as known words are words that she already has in her vocabulary.
Okay, good. So we're going to use words. I use letter sounds, math facts, whatever, but today we're going to use words. And so the 2 talk about knock and slowly are the unknowns, sorry. Every other word you see is a known. Oftentimes what we'll do is if I want to teach a kid 10 things, I'll go through all 10 and they know 5 and don't know 5. What I'll do is take the 5 they don't know and practice those over and over again. That's the original, that's drill and kill. So remember, I want to see 90%. Remember I said 90% is a good criterion most of the time. So I want to build that 90% in. So I'm going to take 9 unknown, 9 knowns, 9 things the kid can tell you right away, look at right away and tell you the answer, and 1 unknown at a time. Use the knowns to teach the unknowns like this.
I'm going to teach you 2 new words that you don't know yet. This word is slowly. Repeat it, please.
Slowly.
Can you use it in a sentence?
My turtle moves slowly.
Perfect. What's this word?
Slowly. Long. Slowly. Long. Drum. Slowly. Long. Drum. Ball.
Good.
All those were knowns.
Slowly. Long. Drum. Ball. Them. Slowly. Long. Drum. Ball. Them. Call.
Very good.
Slowly.
So you see what she's doing?
Long. Drum. Ball. Them. Call. Day.
She's showing the first unknown and
Slowly.
then 1
Long.
known.
Drum.
First unknown, 2
Ball.
known, etc.
Them. Call. Day. 4.
Okay, again.
Slowly. Long. Drum. Ball. Them. Call. Day. 4. Hand.
Good. Okay, now I'm going to introduce a second word and take.
So now she's going to start a second word. So she puts in the second word. She no longer has 1 unknown and 9 knowns because she just taught that kid that word. So she has 10 knowns. So you put in the next unknown, you take out a previous known. So the number of cards in your hand stays the same.
Take 1 known word out. This word is knock. Can you repeat it, please?
Knock.
Can you use it in a sentence?
I have to knock on the door to get in.
Good. Perfect. Okay, what is this word?
And that
Knock.
starts over.
Slowly. Knock. Slowly. Long. Knock. Slowly. Long. Drum. Knock. Slowly. Long. Drum. Ball.
Etc. So basically all it does is it gives lots of practice for a particular sound, whatever. But with lots of knowns built in, so they have this sense of success and something to scaffold it to, etc. We have studied this a number of times. Oops, I'll start, there we go. We have studied this a number of times. This is just a sampling of them. We've used teach, like I said, all the things I was listed earlier, math facts, letter sounds, you name it. We've taught this. It says here, is this method used mostly for irregular words within a scope sequence, depending on the skill and focus? The answer is yes to that. It's both. We've used it to teach irregular words. Yep. But we've also used it to teach high frequency words that kids just weren't learning for whatever reason. We've used it to teach letter sounds, math facts, spelling lists, vocab words, English translations to various words, etc. And the National Center on Intensive Intervention, they rate interventions. You want to see a full bubble. Full bubble is good. A half bubble means partially convincing. You don't want to see empty bubbles. Empty bubbles are bad. So this Tutoring Buddy is an app that uses incremental rehearsal. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 studies they rate of incremental rehearsal, and they say all good study designs, and the effect size is 1.45 and 0.89. So really good effects. Or visual analysis, convincing visual analysis. So we consistently see good research that says this is an effective intervention. It's definitely something you could use. So if a kid's not learning it the kid's learning it in the first place, but the next day not remembering it, it might at the end take that, whatever you just taught the kid, and practice it with IR. You know, you taught them the letter sound CH. So I'll the grapheme CH. So I will sit down with the kid and do IR with CH or something like that to help them retain it. By the way, I'll admit right now, I hardly ever use 9 knowns. I start with 7 or 8. Usually that's enough. If the kid's not remembering it, add knowns in because it gets more repetition, but never go above 9. With little kids, I start with 5. Kindergartners, first grade, preschoolers, we use 5. If they're bored, take out knowns, but never go below 5. If they don't remember it well, add in knowns, but never go above 9. So I usually start with 7 or 8. And most of the research is on 9. Some have done 7, some have done 8, but I usually start with 7 or 8. If you go to my YouTube channel and search incremental rehearsal. There's a couple of videos there, or just put it in YouTube in general. There's a bunch of videos of IR now because it's been studied so often. So one way is certainly that I want an intervention is to switch the intervention, which means add incremental rehearsal. Use that. Again, I've done with math facts, et cetera, et cetera. I added in here information about repeated reading, which here's a script on how to do it. I'm not going to talk about how to do it. You know, there's a script you can follow. It's pretty straightforward. Cold read, practice, 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 hot read type thing with instructional level text. That's really important. Kids have to be able to read this 93 to 97% of the words. So I agree with this. I'd rather it be too easy than too hard. So I want passages the kids can read with at least 95% accuracy. They can read 95% of the words, do cold read, hot read, cold read, practice, 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 hot read. Now, real briefly, what's great about incremental rehearsal, repeated reading, is you got data built in. You do a cold read and we graph it. Words read correctly. Practice, 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 hot read, graph it. So in this example, it's kind of what you want to see. I see a nice big jump during the intervention session, okay? Here it's going really well. And you'll see the cold reads gradually going up. We're doing this every day, so a gradual increase in cold reads is great. So this looks about right. You want to see big jumps during the intervention session and cold reads gradually going up. Now, it might be some bounce, but generally speaking, the trend is up. Now look at these two sets of data. Here I have a kid. We don't see big jumps during the intervention session. When that's the case, this is indicating that they're not learning it in the first place. Assess phonics. Now, if they have good phonics skill, then pick an easier passage for repeated reading. Those are the two options for that one. This kid, we do see nice big jumps, but here the cold reads are not going up. So here the kid's learning it, but not remembering it, not retaining it. So for that kid, don't do cold read, practice, 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 hot read. Do cold read, practice, 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 hot read. Add in more practices. There's this idea that repeated reading is you read the same passage every day for a week. That's not repeated reading. Repeated reading is cold read, practice, 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 hot read within one session. 1 minute each, 5 minutes. It's pretty quick, plus error correction. The whole thing's 6-7 minutes. It can be done in a small group quite effectively. But within one session, cold, practice, 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 hot, within one session. Does that make sense? Here's a word sort. If you're doing word sorts and the kid's learning it in the first place but not remembering it, all you have to do is add in more words to sort. We're doing a word sort by sound, by spelling pattern. So cat, plate, and bait. You give the kids this row. You do the first row for them. Cat, hat. Hat sounds like cat, looks like cat. We'll put that there. Fate, fate. Cat, plate, bait. Sounds like these two, looks like that one. I'll put that one there. Train, okay. Sounds like these two, looks like that one. Put that one there. Give the kid these 3 cards. The kid sorts them. You say, good job. Then you give them these 9 to sort on their own. If they can do it right then, but the next day they've forgotten it, add in a bunch more words to sort. Give them, instead of 9, instead of 12 words to sort, give them 15 or 18. So add in more repetition. You could add in more repetition, more number of reads, more examples, more items. Just add in more repetition if the kid's learning it in the first place, but not remembering it. And then lastly, I'm not going to spend time on this one, unfortunately, because this one's pretty rare. You see it more in math than reading. You see validated, if you see kids learning it in the first place and remembering it, but not applying it, that doesn't happen very often in reading. It does happen more in math. Let me skip this one. There we go. It does happen more in math. So if I see a kid learning it in the first place, but not remembering it, and remembering it, but not applying it, I'm probably going to try something like, like reciprocal teaching to help kids during reading, or a story map, something like that. Here's one story map. Here's another type of story map, shows different types of reading, etc. I might use something like that. But usually, if a kid's struggling to apply it, you've got to teach them more closely how you want them to use it. So if they learn it, remember it, but they can't apply it, teach them how you want them to use it. So don't teach letter sounds, teach words that contain sounds. and have them read sentences. So for example, for this kid, they really struggle with reading consonant blends. So we stopped teaching consonant blends. We taught them words. We didn't teach MP. We taught the kid to read jump and bump and what are small ones? I can't any others, etc. And then afterwards, we have them read 10 sentences that contain each of those words. So teach them how you want them to use it. That's what you do when the kids are struggling with generalization. Again, spend much time on that because that's rarely the case. I'm trying to read through some of your questions. Only got a few minutes left. Let me make 2 points and I'll respond to these questions. Writing, this is about reading today, but writing, same thing. Struggling to learn in the first place, look at Early Writing Project. Google that. It's out of the University of Minnesota and University of Missouri. It's a wonderful way to teach kids who are really struggling with the basic writing, the basic learning, initially learning the basic ideas of writing. If they're struggling to maintain it, repeated reading or repeated practice of writing. If they can't apply it or generalize it, that's what SRSD, the self-regulated strategy development, that's what those tools are for, and they're wonderful for that. So the same thing applies for writing as it does for reading. Okay, for time's sake, I'm going to skip these examples and show you this. So here's a teacher. This is a great teacher. I was working with these kids on small groups, and they're doing sound partners, which is a great intervention. Wasn't working well for 2 kids, for example, and this teacher got Lynn Fuchs's article and said, I'm going to add in more comprehensiveness. I'm adding more modeling. Well, that didn't help. I'm going to build in more transfer. I see a little bit of growth. For this kid, this teacher tried more dosage. That didn't help. Again, they tried comprehensiveness for this kid, dosage for this kid. I don't know why. Neither works. They tried transfer for both kids. That didn't work. So that's when they called me. I said, oh, okay. This kid was not learning in the first place. Dosage is not going to help. Do more modeling. The kid took off. This kid was learning in the first place, but not remembering it. They need more practice. Added more dosage, and the kids took off. All right, let me look at some of these questions that came in. Why would you not recommend repeated reading of the same text throughout the week? Because it's not effective. So there's nothing, it's not a bad thing to do per se, but it's not effective. So all the research on repeated reading is 1 session per day, same passage 5 times, okay? That's all the research around it. It's never been Monday read it, Tuesday read it, Thursday read it once. It's just not rapid enough repetition. Yeah, okay, so we already mentioned that is being recorded. Have I ever done research on whether teaching finding skills in context of increased text demand has a positive effect? So yes, it does for some kids. It can be slower, correct, but for some kids, that's the way you have to do it. Many kids just learn it, but for some kids, you really got to teach it within text. I think that's an important thing for many kids. Oh, it's just the questions. That wasn't so bad at all. So let me, my 2 minutes left here. This is a cheat sheet that I created, which is in this Google Drive, a cheat sheet for how to intensify intervention. So in it, based on the different areas of reading and the learning phase, so learning it in the first place, remembering it, or generalizing it, I think I put math in there as well. Here are some nice validated programs for each of these areas, and an intervention we can use that, or ways we can adapt it as well. So this is in the handout I gave you. It's also, I sent you an article, the article that right here with these kids, those are from that article. I put that I gave you a copy of that article as well. I also in your handout gave you a handout on how to do incremental rehearsal. So there's a script on how to do that as well. So let's look at these kids. These kids I'd mentioned at the beginning. So what we did is we then assessed learning in the first place, remembering it, generalizing it, modified the intervention based on it, and look how much we changed their growth. You know, we saw this kid go from 0.25 to 8. We saw negative 0.64 to positive 0.55. We saw a nice turnaround for almost every single kid. This kid went from -3 to +3. That was pretty awesome. We had a couple kids up there. We had this kid went from 0 to -0.4. So after 12 weeks, we're still seeing flat to negative growth. I'm ready to call that kid LD right now. Same with maybe this kid. After 30 weeks, just not seeing the growth we need. And we know we did intervention matched to the kid's needs, and we know we did it right. This kid after 20 weeks, 0.33, yep, 0.16, 0.39, 0.18. So across these 6 schools, I've got, well, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 kids, maybe 7 kids. I think I'm ready to call LD right now because we've done these really good interventions, match their needs. But most of the other kids did really, really well. But once we fixed it to match their intervention, and my little buddy Lonnie, the kid for whom we developed this framework, after figuring out what he needed, and he needed initial learning, so we took his letter sounds and gave him, see that picture right there with the letter H? Again, he had phonemic awareness. He knew hammer started with, so instead of teaching him H says, we taught him H, hammer says, H therefore says, and after doing this, we figured it out, we tried it, and you'll see, I'm not gonna show the video for time's sake, but I show him the H, and for the first time since this kid started school, we showed him a card that had the letter we just taught him, and he got it right. And the video was pretty awesome because the coach starts crying and the teacher starts crying. It's pretty awesome. At the end of 2nd grade, this little guy, during his while he was at school, was referred for special ed testing, scored in the intellectual disability range, but the parents said no. Parents said, this is working, we're going to stick to it. And he never got special ed services. And by the end of 2nd grade, he was a grade level reader. Took a lot of work to get him there, but we did it. Once we figured out what they needed and we could match the intervention, intensify it to their needs, and he was a sweet, cute little boy. It was really fun. So I conclude with this. Sometimes questions are complicated, but the answers are simple. And that's this. Yes, these are complicated questions. These are complicated kids. Learning in the first place, remembering it, generalizing it, match the intervention to the kid's needs. It's pretty simple. Feel free to email me, or what do you say now? You don't say tweet me anymore. X me, whatever. Don't X me. That sounds terrible. But whatever, I'm pretty active on social media. If you have questions later, please email me. I'm happy to respond and support you any way I can. Thank you for giving me these few minutes of this really cool day-long conference. If I can support your efforts in the future, please let me know. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Burns. We really appreciate you being here today. And participants, remember the next session begins at 11 a.m. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Bye.